All right, thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of their day to join us on today's WRAP resource meeting. So I just wanted to first say thank you all for coming and let you know that Amy Bach will not be able to join us today. The CDI has called her in for today's agent broker briefing. So she is going to be helping them out today. And so Valerie Brown and I will be leading this meeting. So thanks so much. We wanted to start just and say thank you to everyone who helped get the word out about our recent home shopping health webinar. We had a really great turnout. It was very timely, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of where it's located on our website. We do these webinars about every 6 months or so. So if people in your community need this information between now and, we might do the next one a little sooner since it got a lot of attention, but also if fire season happens, we'll be switching our focus there. I share both the fire chiefs' enthusiasm for a late start this fire season. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and I'm going to show you just how to find the webinar that we just recorded on our website. So uphelp.org, and then if you go to events, so you can just type in events, or you can go over to the navigation over here to program events, and then it's a past event. So if you just scroll down, obviously it will move around as we have more and more past events, but here we are. So you will see that keeping your home protected, you can see that it's a little bit of a blue color instead. And then if you scroll down, we put the video right on this page. It will also live in our WRAP Resource Center as well. So if you go to Get Prepared in the WRAP Resource Center, what you'll be able to see here is the WRAP Resource Center. Just wanted to make sure that everyone is getting comfortable here. You go to your county for more information. While on this page, we have some more information about the county, how to get prepared, and all the wonderful partner organizations and mitigation resources for your county. When you scroll up right at the top of that, the insurance help is on every county page. And that insurance help is where we're also keeping our most up-to-date tips, a link to the webinar, and then also additional shopping help resources. So other resources as well. So we're updating this. It's all everything that we mentioned in the webinar. If you're like, oh, how do I find the CDI mandatory moratorium lookup? Or if you need help finding our publication, this is all on this one page. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone's starting to feel comfortable on the WRAP Resource Center and know where this webinar is going to live. Again, thank you for everyone who attended, everyone who helped spread the word. We had over 1,000 people register. We're just really, really grateful that we were able to get that information out and that we had the climate to have people receive that information. And then one other piece I just wanted to float out there before I pass it over to Val to introduce our presenter today. Is that, we just wanted to get everyone to think about these meetings and who we're missing. Is there anyone that that would be a good resource for this group? We just want to put that out there that you're always welcome to, send introductions, to someone who you think should be involved, whose voice would be helpful at this table. And I will put my email if you don't already get you get all the communications from me anyways, but I'll put it in the chat. It's emily@uphelp.org. So, as you're starting to think about this, if there is someone else you want to invite to join, we're happy to have them. And then also, while you're thinking, if there's anyone you're interested in having us hear from as well as a featured presenter, we always want some input from the group. So just know that my inbox is always open, and you can share anything here with me. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Valerie.
All right, thank you, Emily. My name is Valerie Brown. I'm the Deputy ED for United Policyholders, and it is my pleasure to introduce Paul Lowenthal, the Division Chief and Fire Marshal for Santa Rosa Fire Department, who's going to talk about current community mitigation efforts and initiatives to help property owners with home hardening and defensible space. We're so excited to have you. And what I would ask everyone is if you will put your questions for Paul in the chat after he does his presentation, I'll moderate those. And Paul, you should be able to share your screen.
Got it. Good to go. All right. Well, thank you. Like Val said, my name is Paul Lowenthal, Division Chief Fire Marshal for Santa Rosa. I've been with Santa Rosa for about 23 years now, and 25 years total in the fire service, both in prevention and in operations. For those of you that joined a little early, might have heard Chief Tyler and I talking. I'm also our public information officer, so I tend to talk a lot. And so I will do my best to keep this to about 30 minutes or so. Give people a chance to answer questions, and then also speak to what Amy had asked to. Originally, she reached out to have me talk about kind of what's going on with Santa Rosa and where we're at today. I did see the email over the weekend to focus on home hardening and defensible space. So I definitely made some updates and changes to the PowerPoint to make sure we're covering our basis. But really, Santa Rosa, as we talked about at the beginning of the meeting, for those who joined early, kind of was put on the map, unfortunately, for a number of reasons, most notably with which were a number of fires that either directly impacted or threatened our community. And from that, we really have set up our community for success following two general paths, the Ready SR, or Ready Santa Rosa, and Wildfire Ready, which we'll get into. So Ready SR was kind of the basis of what we were doing to make our community better prepared for the next wildfire, but really disasters in general. And before we started diving into defensible space, home hardening, a lot of the mechanisms and tools that we had been educating our community on before the 17 fires, we found that no matter how much we did to educate, people weren't prepared for wildfires here, especially locally. Most people in Santa Rosa thought that the only thing that was going to happen to us locally was an earthquake. And so the 17 fires were obviously a wake-up call, and it laid out the foundation again for us to focus on how to make our community better prepared before the fire occurs. And so with that, we'll kind of dive into what some of these subtopics are underneath our two websites. And our two web pages that we've been basically directing everybody to are the srcity.org/readysr and srcity.org/wildfireready. Whoops, sorry. And so what's happening here? Sorry about that. So yes, so where are we today since 2017? The 17 fires were the Tubbs and Nuns, the 19 fire, the Kincaid, and the 2020 fires, the Glass fires. As far as we know, we're one of the only, if not the only community in California that has been either threatened or directly impacted by 4 major wildfires. It's not a title you want. It's not a title that you want to lose, because that typically means that somebody has gone through something worse than you have. And that's exactly kind of how we felt after the 17 fires, where based on the number of fatalities and damage and everything, with it being the most destructive wildfire, it was again the title you didn't want, but you didn't want to lose. And then came the campfire. So from that, what really laid out the foundation for a lot of our items that we have done or put forth to make our community better prepared really came out of our community wildfire protection plan. We've been involved with and seen a lot of plans around the state that seem more cookie cutter in nature and are checking boxes and crossing T's and dotting I's and making communities better in a better position to achieve grants and projects, but we opted to go for a community wildfire protection plan that really got into the weeds, no pun intended, but really laid out a path and kind of a living document for 5 years of legitimate objectives and actionable items to make our community better prepared. And it covers everything from improving our evacuation routes to education, which again, I was talking about has become critical as to, in addition to what we can do to mitigate the threat of wildfires through hardening, treating vegetation, and increased staffing and so on and so forth. A lot of effort went into reestablishing kind of our ability to alert and warn. So again, the reason we put so much effort into this was because it really doesn't do a lot of good to put defensible space and home hardening in place if people aren't prepared to evacuate, if people aren't in a better position to understand how to get the alerts, to get the warnings, to be informed, to know what areas are being affected. We saw it in 17. We saw entire Firewise community within our jurisdiction that wasn't prepared, but they had done defensible space, they had done home hardening, and clearly the homes didn't make it because they didn't have evacuation checklists, they didn't have go bags ready to go, they didn't close doors and windows, they didn't know what should be done when they left to make their home savable. So we went through an entire education campaign on the Know Your Alerts. We went through an entire education campaign on evacuation zones. We opted to not use numerical and alphabetical numbers and letters for our zones. We opted to actually name them, and are the only agency in our county that named them. And we did it for two reasons. One is just for ease and understanding for our community. And then two, for visitors and people in the area, that if you get a WIA on your cell phone and it says Spring Lake zone evacuated and you're in Spring Lake, it's probably a good chance that there's something going on that you need to get out, versus just 10 Alpha Bravo or 12 Paul Victor, which oftentimes don't mean a lot to a lot of people. From that, we spent a lot of time drilling down into, just because we tell you to evacuate, it's critical that you know your ways out. The Know Your Ways Out campaign was another big one. It has become even more critical, especially since the 2020 fires, when people did exactly what we didn't want them to do. And when we evacuated the east side of Santa Rosa for the glass fire, everybody did what they normally did and hit Highway 12 and headed towards the center of town like they would for the grocery store and everything else. And we ended up with about 3 hours of traffic. In that particular case, we actually expected it and had at least 4 hours to get everybody out of harm's way. But it highlighted the need to be able to help communicate and plan for neighborhood travel routes and getting people to know the different ways out of their specific areas. The other thing that we put into effect here in Santa Rosa is our new temporary evacuation point. So every time there is a red flag warning, regardless of whether or not there is any fire activity, we automatically staff and put into place all of the needs for our temporary evacuation points. This basically enables anybody within our community that has to evacuate for some sort of a developing incident to be able to go to a place to play on the far west side of Santa Rosa, potentially, and hopefully out of any harm's way, and gives people a safe location to go to. We also developed checklists, evacuation checklists that made life a lot easier and were specific to Santa Rosa needs, including our temporary evacuation point. We've really been just unloading information and campaigns, newsletters, mailers, anything and everything we can do to educate before the next incident happens. And then switching out of education to more the vegetation side of the things. So the srcity.org/wildfire ready has become the landing page for, again, everything veg management, wildfire preparedness related. From that website, there's a number of tabs that we have that allow property owners and homeowners and visitors a place to come to learn about what's happening and what they can do. This page has actually changed a little bit where it says city efforts to reduce wildfire risks. That's actually tied into our grants right now. This screenshot's a little bit old. But but we have everything from how to educate people on our WUI, which makes up about 30% of our city, a link to our community wildfire protection plan, what the city's doing to reduce wildfire risks, which I'll get into. There's still people that are constantly looking for information on weather and warnings, what can be done to reduce your risk. The property owner resource library for us has become a big one. We produce a electronic newsletter in the city every week that has about 100,000 subscribers now. And we write a wildfire ready article every week of our quote unquote fire season here locally. Santa Rosa does actually still declare the start and stop of fire season. It's not as much about the threat of fire. Agencies like CAL FIRE and other agents and a number of other agencies across the state don't declare the start and stop of the season because there's always some level of threat and risk. We don't disagree with that at all, but ours are tied to ordinances that we have in our city. So when our fire season is declared start and stop, it initiates our weed abatement program, and it suspends our pile burning program. Pile burning and any type of burning actually did not take place at all in the city historically for decades and decades. We actually changed that mainly through our community wildfire protection plan recommendations and initiated pile burning for the first time within the city limits 2 years ago. So pile burning suspends during our local fire season, and then the weed abatement program kicks in. Most of the information and articles that we produce, a lot of those links based on different information that we provided to the community ends up in the property owner's resource library. So grants, the comment I made about the most destructive wildfire and the number of fires that we had has always kind of resonated with me. During the 2020 glass fire, I was standing in Mountain Hawk in our burn scar with then the Cal OES director, Gary Larducci, and the federal administrator of Region 9, Bob Fenton. They were with me as well as our fire chief at the time and our former city manager. And Director Gary Larducci looked at me because we had worked very closely together when I led the recovery efforts during the 2017 fires for the city, and asked what the city's doing to prevent this from happening so that we don't have to, quote, keep meeting like this. I looked at our fire chief and I looked at our city manager and asked him for basically permission to be pretty blunt with the director, and they gave me the nod. And I basically laid it out and said that Cal OES and FEMA have definitely not been a advocate for us. That since the 17 fires, we had actually put in a number of grant applications for projects that had either been denied or killed at the notice of interest phase, and was able to point up at the burn scar above where we were standing from the glass fire and told him that that area was actually an area that we intended to mitigate through a grant that his agency had actually denied us. And at the time, we had 2 notice of interests into Cal OES. One of them was for an evacuation route fuel treatment project, and the other one was for what we refer to as our WUI modification project, which essentially deals with home hardening and defensible space. After I said what I said, within about 5 days, all of a sudden we got a notification from Cal OES that our 2 grants had been approved at the notice of interest level, and we're moving on. It was nice to share how I really felt, because ultimately it led to 2 projects that are now finally moving forward. We reached out to Marin County and their organization down there to ask about how they were handling some of their grants, and were connected with Fireside. Fireside is who we are now in contract with to help with the back end of our grants that we're rolling out. The 2 grants in total are about $5 million. The city of Santa Rosa received $95 million in funds from the 2017 wildfires from PG&E. Council initially allocated $5.25 million for us to kickstart a vegetation management program within the city. When these grants were approved, Cal OES did not have the match program in place yet, which would cover our 25% cost share. So 25% of $5 million is a lot of money. So council allocated an additional dollar amount of about $1.25 million to cover our cost share and the investment of the two grants. The one of them, the evacuation route fuel treatment project, is intended to mitigate fuels along the designated routes, as you can see. And then the WUI modification program will be first come, first serve for our entire wildland and urban interface, and will help with defensible space improvements as well as home hardening that includes vent screens and gutter guards. We unfortunately ran into quite a hiccup here within our jurisdiction with a backup in contract approvals through our city attorney's office. When you look at what the normal course of business is for a city and a city attorney's office processing grants, and then you look at the number of projects that are still in process and or wrapping up at various levels as a result of the 2017 and 2020 fires, it caused a significant log jam within our contracting for the city. So we were delayed 9 months in getting these grants rolled out and had to go through a number of extension requests from Cal OES. Regardless, we're now full steam ahead on our phase one, where we'll be able to opt residents into these projects. Once we get everybody opted in for the fuel treatments and validated, as well as the home hardening efforts, then we'll be able to resubmit that back to Cal OES and FEMA, and then look forward to funding all the projects, the physical work in 2024. It's a little sad that, and I'll admit it, that here we are 6 years later and finally starting to make some groundwork on grant projects. Regardless, we've still been doing everything we can within our organization and city to make our community safer. We've contracted with Sonoma County supervised adult crews. So we're essentially using probation crews to conduct field treatments. We're in the process of finalizing a memorandum of MOU with the conservation crew of the North Bay. And we've also in the process of wrapping up and finalizing a MOU with the Santa Rosa Junior College that will allow them to teach defensible space, fuel treatment, shaded fuel breaks to a workforce where they can get accredited and certified in it. And they'll be utilizing Santa Rosa city-owned properties and open space to do a lot of that work, as well as potentially now utilizing our city properties to teach grazing, which is a new course that they're in the process of moving forward with. The third grant we have was through HCD. It's a mitigation PPS project where HCD is pretty new to this world when it comes to funding kind of mitigation projects. So we were able to get, in addition to the $5 million in grants, $500,000 from HCD. And that $500,000 is actually now funding essentially a community outreach specialist to do education and outreach specific to home hardening, vegetation management, defensible space, and then ultimately help pay for assessments as well. So right now, what it's doing is it's funding everything from 3 years of our Wildfire Ready Resource Fair, which is a resource fair that we host here in Santa Rosa with not just our city, but partnering agencies, everything from Fire Safe Sonoma to Sonoma Ecology Center, Red Cross, just a number of different agencies that will all be able to come together at the resource fair. It's funding a lot of our giveaways and handouts that we didn't necessarily have the finances for in the past, but a lot of them are now being designed and geared specifically towards Wildfire Ready. We had these signs in the city at different locations as you come into Santa Rosa that would typically say things like change your battery twice a year, things like that. So we're using the money to design changeable signs that as you come into the city. So like in the summertime, it'll say prepare for wildfires with this. During the quote unquote off season, it'll switch to prepare for emergencies, srcity.org. So different education outreach things that we'll be able to put up around our community, and again, funded through grants. The other thing that we're doing in addition to pile burning is actual vegetation management burning throughout our city, which again never took place in Santa Rosa. We had our first fire on Old Redwood Highway, which is in the burn scar of the tubs. And we're in communication and working with CAL FIRE to essentially over time continue to treat a pretty significant corridor between kind of where the Journey's End Mobile Home Park, which burned down near Kaiser, is located here in the city of Santa Rosa, up into what we refer to as our Mark West corridor, where the Tubbs fire kind of blew into the city. So the goal over the years to come is to kind of chunk away at different pieces of that kind of linear distance between CAL FIRE and Santa Rosa. Our new kind of emerging threat that we're dealing with is the change of our environment in Santa Rosa specifically. So our WUI used to be mostly oak and grass woodlands, with us now having 3 burn scars in the city, and a significant portion of our canopy within our WUI that was affected all completely burned off and essentially did not survive like they originally thought they would. We're seeing a massive regrowth of invasive species, Scotch broom, French broom, bay, and in large portions of our wildland urban interface in areas where homes are now being rebuilt, obviously to current standards with defensible space, home hardening. The areas around them are worse today than they were in 2017. So that's presenting a new challenge for us, one that I think we're going to be struggling with for some time to come, but it has become a new priority for us to now look at different ways of writing ordinances and codes and or funding different measures that we're going to have to take here locally. And then one noteworthy thing is based on kind of all the work which we've been doing at a preparedness level, a mitigation level, as well as just the things that we've done differently and are helping lead around the country, from changing everything from being involved in the changing of the Stafford Act to changing the way that alert and warning takes place. Santa Rosa was the first and may still be the, if not the only city in the country that had full IPAWS capabilities and alert and warning following the what occurred here in 2017. We've been helping lobby in Washington pretty regularly, very involved in, again, efforts locally across the country, as well as aiding other jurisdictions with kind of our lessons learned from a response to fire standpoint, as well as a preparedness and mitigation standpoint. Based on all that work, FEMA actually reached out to us a couple months ago and brought what they refer to as their Vanguard group, which is a group of leaders from across the country that they brought here to Santa Rosa and spent a day with us, essentially doing a case study on where Santa Rosa was in 2017, the effects of the wildfire, and everything that has come from it, and what we're doing to make our community better prepared for wildfires moving forward. So that was definitely an exciting opportunity, and kind of good to talk about and share our experiences, what's working, what doesn't work, with leaders from literally across the entire country. And I was told to keep it at about 30 minutes, so hopefully that flew through quick enough and did what Amy wanted covered.
You are great, Paul, and I do have some questions for you. And if you don't mind, if you don't mind sharing that to give people a chance to grab your contact information, and I'll start with the questions. So the first I've got is, how long after the 2017 fires did it take community leadership to start the preparedness campaigns? Was that during long-term recovery, or, you know, after a certain time when people had bandwidth to do it?
Yeah, so ironically, we had actually received a grant to put together some outreach in 2016. That was the last successful grant that we had, and we couldn't get people to come to those community meetings. We put them in. We have essentially 4 WUIs within our city that are all broken up and separate. The turnout was really, really low when the recovery efforts were taking place from 17. We found that we probably were averaging, I mean, just multiple community meetings a week for a long time. And when all said and done, probably did 100, 150 community meetings for the recovery process. And it became very clear during those recovery meetings that not only did people want to rebuild and improve, but there was an expectation that we were going to figure out how to educate them better than we had been trying before. And so we had started laying out the framework for the education, and it was being received pretty, it was almost expected and demanded, and rightfully so. But the efforts truly were paying off when the glass fire burned into our east part of Santa Rosa and Oakmont. We were literally watching the fire burn into the community and absolutely run out of fuel and burn itself out, and raining embers down onto homes that had gutter guards in place. And it was incredible to see that much fire, that many embers, that much of a fire front come into that community and only lose. In Oakmont, I think we ended up with about six residential units. That was incredible to go from where we were in 17. In 20, we had 1,152 properties that were impacted by fire and only 35 homes destroyed.
Wow. Can we follow up on that? Speaking about the 2017 and what you're saying, damage. Can you speak more to why the FireWise recognized community didn't survive that fire?
Yeah, so what we saw and what we know happened and what we likely included our own fire station that had just been recently constructed to current standards, is that was a very nice, warm, windy evening. And when you're dealing with, upwards of 100-mile-an-hour winds, and the embers that were being blown in, I think, and it's part of why we've educated on everything that should be done from evacuation checklists. I mean, think about how many, it sounds funny, but how many dog doors were probably flapping in the wind, embers blowing in, and how many people that had including probably our own fire station, had sliders open that night because it was just a really nice, warm, windy evening. And that's how it was when people went to sleep that night, including myself. I remember before I went to work that evening, same thing. I had doors wide open because it was just a nice evening. So when people woke up to lack of power, lack of situational awareness, I mean, think of how many people manually opened the door and didn't close it back up when they left,
Right. Or manually open their garage door. That's what happened in my fire in 07.
Right.
The power was out. You couldn't drive out unless you could manually open the garage door. And the idea that you were going to take the time to close it didn't happen. Yeah. I had friends whose homes burned from the inside out because of a window, or the wind catching a door and blowing it as they're evacuating. They're like, okay, it's a loss.
Yeah. And then at that point, once you have that many homes going, it became unstoppable.
Right. Well, I think that speaks to the fact that no matter what you do, it's at the best, and this is my personal words, not putting words in anybody else's mouth. It's at best a 95% solution. You can do everything right, and still something can go wrong. I have a friend who, as she drove off, the wind blew embers into her house. The door just didn't catch in the latch. Hurricane gale force winds blew it in, burned from the inside out. There was nothing to do to stop that. That's just what it was. So talking about your education piece, so can you talk a little bit about that fire weather alert system and those resources for residents? How you're building on these education efforts, but as residents move out and new people move in, how are you keeping, that level of situational awareness with your new people?
Mailers, a lot of mailers. And that's part of why the benefit of this new educational grant that we have right now is we're able to fund a lot of mailers that update people on what they should be doing, what they should be aware of. the electronic newsletter, like, that's been huge for us. It's actually kind of amazing how many people intentionally sign up for it just to see what articles are coming out over the summer. I've had people pull me aside at events that we're at that have told me that they did, they did everything that we talked about, and they used those articles to make themselves better prepared. The weather piece, we actually just installed 5 RAWS stations, so remote automated weather stations within our community. That's been one of the kind of the interesting things, is there's so many people that get worked up when they hear the National Weather Service, or they see that there's a wind advisory or something taking place. And we've got very different microclimates in Santa Rosa. We can be very windy on our west side of Santa Rosa, well outside of our wildland urban interface, and our actual WUI, our wildland, our east side, and our hills have little to no wind at all, or the temperatures and humidities are much different. So we're in the process right now of working with our vendor to essentially land all of our official remote automated weather stations that are owned and operated and installed in the city of Santa Rosa, in and around, on a new weather essentially page that will allow people to monitor conditions in real time, see what's happening, see why we are asking for people to be, more aware or not. I think that's maybe what we're talking about, but
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And then let me throw out another question to you. So what kind of ordinances have you revised, updated, or modified to address these additional needs for wildfire mitigation and prevention efforts? I know that's sometimes a tricky.
it is, and it's the priority actually for this year. We're trying to, the building official and myself have set a goal to be done by this calendar year with a new ordinance that will address some of the discrepancies and issues that we're having between what we want to see, what water use efficiency wants to see, kind of the conflicts between WELO and fire.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we're going to tackle and likely require the removal of any type of invasive species like Scotch broom, French broom, bay within X number of feet of a public right of way. So our roadways.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the other piece of it is our deadened down trees. Wildfires are not uncommon to California. You can drive around a burn scar probably anywhere in the state and see just thousands of dead trees. There was an expectation from our community that we were going to force the requirement of all those dead trees within our city, and that's just not a reality. I couldn't imagine how anybody would accomplish that financially, physically. There's just so many of them. The challenge that we've run into is that although we have a lot of dead and dying trees, and that's a pretty common thing around the state, we have 9,000 parcels within our WUI, and thousands of those parcels were impacted by fire, and thousands of those parcels still have dead and down trees. So although we won't require the removal of all of them, we will start now requiring the removal of ones that are in a
the evacuation. Yeah.
defensible space zone along an evacuation route, or we're going to probably take it a step further and adjacent to a property line. So somebody's property can't be negatively impacted by somebody's dead and down trees.
Got it. And that involves some creative solutions.
Correct.
With volunteer groups and grant funding.
And what happens if people don't do it, and how do we fund?
Right. And Mark put a comment in there. Town of Paradise got a large FEMA grant to remove the dead trees. I mean, that's been going on for quite a while.
So that's a different, so ironically, that was one of my other big issues that I talked about to FEMA at the Vanguard group with it. So Santa Rosa, I actually wrote the notice of interest to implement a wood management program through the state for the Tubbs and Nuns fires, and was denied by Cal OES. And pretty much everything I wrote in my letter of notice of interest for a tree removal program is exactly what Cal OES did in Paradise. So although it was unfortunate that we didn't get it in Santa Rosa, at least the work that we did here locally actually ended up helping another community.
Got it. All right. I've got a few more questions if you don't mind. So regarding the vegetation management programs, how do you plan to reduce your wildfire risk? You're taking your CWPP, you've got this goal, and how are you going to keep track of it, right? Because that's a lot of moving parts, and quantifying that is complicated.
It is. And so we've committed and we've already done, we basically put together an annual report that tracks all the work that we're doing on the objectives and action items underneath our program that are contained through the CWPP. And we present that information to council annually. So it keeps our elected officials updated on what we're doing with their money, but then it also keeps us internally on task with what we're doing, what we need to be doing. And then ultimately, the reason that the reason that our city council allocated $5.25 million was $5 million. So essentially $1 million a year for our department to invest over the course of 5 years, but then $250,000 to bring in another consultant to develop an update and revised community wildfire protection plan for our 5-year mark.
Got it.
Which we'll be shopping for. Our company, that the group that did ours, that we were very happy with. We were actually their last CWPP, and then they all retired.
Got it. So I've got just a few more questions. So, and this, one of these I find very interesting because we tried this in 07 and our city shut us down. So have you installed or considered LRAD or sirens in various areas to help with the notifications, especially with those types of winds and people potentially losing power and not being plugged in?
So we actually do not support or utilize outdoor warning systems here locally, and we won't. They will work in certain areas where there's one way in, one way out of a community, and where you hear the siren, it means one thing and one thing only.
Right.
What we have within our community is we've got microclimates, we've got buoys that kind of wind in and out of our interface. And for us, we've invested so much into our ability to alert and warn early. The way that we've got everything pre-scripted, pre-translated, different, we've implemented the NOAA weather radios, just everything that we've done is so that we feel that we've checked all of our boxes, but no, we won't use the outdoor warning systems for Santa Rosa.
Got it. Yeah, and that seems to be across the country from, except for tornadoes, it seems to be there's a bias against them. Yeah. And so just a question that we had about, with your no ways out, the reality, like you said, some communities are truly one route in, out. And so you've described that method for alerting them. Are you looking at those? I've seen in other communities, they'll do, a grant for the transportation department that's going to add a widen lane, a bike lane that ends up becoming allows you to have two lanes out and then one incoming for, emergency vehicles. Are you pipelining those so that you've got that option?
So we've done grant funding to put battery backup in our traffic signals. We've reprogrammed and invest additional funding into being able to turn our traffic signals on all to keep one direction of travel flowing out of our east part of Santa Rosa, which is what's been affected a number of times. Our biggest limitation is Highway 12. Highway 12 is the east side of Santa Rosa, and it's got a very large senior community called Oakmont in it. And that community, it's ironically complains about that there's only 2 ways out of Oakmont, east and west on Highway 12. And there's 1 lane of traffic in each direction. I keep saying we, like somebody else did the work. I put together an agreement and kind of a understanding and memo between Santa Rosa PD, Santa Rosa Fire, and California Highway Patrol, where in the event that we need to move traffic out of the east side of Santa Rosa quicker than we would typically need to, we have the ability to utilize the agencies to push traffic all in one direction.
Nice. Okay.
Honestly,
I never really did that with hurricanes. I've seen that across country with hurricanes, but I didn't. That's great.
Yeah. Ironically, during this 20 fires, everybody in Oakmont turned out of Oakmont and all went west. When we asked why people didn't go east, they all said that they didn't go east because the east was on fire in 2017. So they thought that it would be safer to go west.
Oh, no.
So if we have to evacuate Oakmont again, even with everything we have in place, we'll likely force 100 cars east, 100 cars west, 100 cars east to kind of break it up.
Right. Makes sense. 2 more questions and then and last call for anyone who has a question. So are you going to be establishing and enforcing any zone 0 requirements into your LRA areas?
Yeah, we did underneath our last code cycle, and we did it again in this code cycle. So we started for new construction, which was obviously a lot of our WUI. The zone 005, 0 to 5 feet of non-combustible, all the way down to the fences immediately around the home. So that is taking place. What we're seeing, unfortunately, is that although they're permitted and approved that way, once the homes are signed off, landscaping is taking place. So we're going to be putting together a program to start enforcing a lot of the now non-compliant homes at a minimum. That's going to be a challenge. Obviously, there's a lot of turnover within our Fountain Grove area, where it's a lot of homes were built, designed by developers, and then sold because of the insurance issues that we ran into in Fountain Grove, where a significant portion of that upper class community was actually underinsured because they owned their homes outright and didn't have
Right. Yeah. No mortgage, no insurance. Yeah.
so a lot of homes are sold up there, and then the new property owners have come in and done what they wanted to do.
Right. So it sounds like an ideal partnership with your Realtors Association and the county to
Yep.
educate on that piece. The last question we have is, does Santa Rosa address rooftop sprinklers and any guidelines for ordinances?
We don't, and we're actually not supporting them right now.
Got it. All right, last call for any questions. If not, I'll let Paul quit talking because he's been talking for a very long time today. Thank you. All right, I think we can let you stop sharing your screen, and we've got a few announcements. Emily, you want to pull up the RAP Resource Center is live. I know you saw it earlier. Emily will share that in the chat. We want to remind you all that United Policyholders, we have our LUSOS grants. If you want to schedule a presentation on the RAP Resource Center and the information we have, especially talking about insurance here, email emily@uphelp.org. And then please share, we can put together an email for you about the RAP Resource Center for your community that can be very county specific, with links to help people, like links to that webinar recording and some other stuff, and our upcoming tip of the month. So please share that information to get this out to everyone. Part of the reason we do what we do here today is to educate you on what's going on in the state and provide those collective resources so that you can leverage it in your community and help move the needle. And let's see, Sue put in the comments, Placerville's experimenting with a trip to green on US 50 to move traffic west on all lanes, which worked for the latest fire. That's one of the things that when we're talking about all this work, as Paul mentioned, like having your evacuation route, having the debris, the vegetation, there we go. The vegetation far enough out that you have safe evacuation routes. And then thinking about how people are going to get out, and understanding people are always going to want to route to their default. This is how I go out of the neighborhood. They're not thinking, they're in a panic. So, anything you can share about where those, evacuation routes are key. It's going to save lives. Emily, anything you want to add? Joel, anything? I'm going to quit talking now. Thank you all for joining us.
All right, just want everyone to save the date for Tuesday, July the 25th for our next meeting. I'll be sending out the registration to link, and please do send me any ideas you have for what you want here in future presentations. Again, if you have a request for a presentation from United Policyholders to your organization, that would be great. And then we have a question about recording, so I can pop that right into the chat. It's on our YouTube channel. And I also send them individually after the meeting. You usually get a link to the last one. So yeah, thank you everyone. And I can put that in the chat right now.
Right. And, just what we're talking about today is that it's that long game, right? We're creating a culture of preparedness, which depends on these important partnerships we're building, sharing information between the communities. And again, thank you, Chief Lowenthal, for your presentation today. So hope you all have a wonderful, productive week. Everybody be safe and enjoy yourselves.